Hi there, it's Lee Mason from SAP. This is the first follow-on video from my blog called SAP Gateway Works Smarter, Not Harder. In part one, we talked about some development patterns and how we can get some reuse and proper business logic encapsulation in our OData entities and our gateway services. So what we'd like to do in this video is go through and show you the objects that we've built to support the pattern, and walk through an example of scaffolding up a new OData service or a new use case, just to show how fast, once you've got your development patterns in place and you've got your entity development in place, how fast it is to go and scaffold up a new service for another use case. Obviously there's a Fiori type UX on top of your OData gateway services, so what we'd like to show you is how fast you can scaffold your OData development, which accelerates your Fiori development in parallel. Throughout the blog, we discuss this class hierarchy, which helps you encapsulate business logic into nice underlying concrete entities and try to give you some modularization of certain functions in SAP. So at the top level here, we've really got this gateway interface, which is just providing the framework to call you get entity set, get entity, update entity, that kind of thing. Sitting underneath that is this Z class OData runtime. So this is where we put the generic search handling. E-tag handling is a really good one in here. So wherever you've got functions that you need to perform on a gateway architecture level, this is where you'd put those type of features. Underneath that is a module specific class. So what we're trying to do is to encapsulate module specific reuse here. Business partner or type functions are a classic example. So you want to format a business partner name. So you might have a group, organization, or an individual, and the format of the full name is different depending on those. So we might put some different function module calls in there to format a business partner name a different way that we can reuse across our concrete entities that inherit from the module specific class. So underneath that, obviously, we get down to the concrete class. This might be an account or an address. We can take that a little bit further and say, I'm going to have a Z class business partner and then create a organization or an individual account under that. A little bit too complex for this example, but it just shows that we can have a concrete class then that defines, create, update, delete, read functions for a specific entity. So we can put in, and this doesn't extend just to business partners, we can obviously apply this concept to sales orders and sales order items, for example, and other different types of objects in other modules in SAP. Let's walk through our SAP Gateway Service Builder. What we've done here is created a service called My Account. So this is the example we've used in the blog. So we have one entity at the moment called an account, has an entity set, a collection called accounts. We've generated this entity off a hard type ABAP structure. So if we have a look at the entity overview here, so the name, account, and the Z structure OData account that we've created in the data dictionary. So we've obviously done an import from the data dictionary and added our properties in here and flagged the relevant properties here as the key, which is the business partner number or partner ID, and we can set some nullable and filterable options here and things that affect the generation of the metadata for this entity. Now, in order to support the implementation of this account entity, we obviously need a class underneath that we've talked about in the blog about business logic encapsulation. So I've already generated this service and created the runtime artifacts, the data provider class and the model provider class here. So if we just jump over to the repository browser here, what we'll see is this Z class OData account that we've created. It has a superclass called Z class OData RT BP, or the runtime business partner. So that's where we've tried to modularize the functions for a business partner, for example. in this class itself, there's a very basic example where there's not a lot we've redefined here. So we've obviously got a OData interface. You can start to see these methods are familiar. Let's switch the filter on and have a look at what we've redefined in here. So what we've done is implement a few methods in here. There's a constructor, the get entity, in which entity set data and generate select for entity set. So as discussed in the blog, we had this generic search pattern that we implemented in this OData runtime class, and we talked about some e-tag handling and a generic search pattern. So for the account, we've adopted this search pattern here, which is why you can't see the get entity set method. All we need to do in this generic search pattern, where we've implemented it in a higher runtime class, is implement a few methods here. One's this generate select for entity set. So I know some people don't like doing it this way, where you're doing dynamic SQL for your selection of an entity set. It seems to work quite well for me. Again, we've talked about the My Accounts 360 application and how it does the same sort of pattern, and that's where we've identified this pattern from and just taken it a little bit further. So all we've done here is do this method called generate select for entity set and put in the account attributes and database attributes that we want to pull out as part of our entity. So it follows a very simple logic here, where we've got the signature of the method. So you've got a select statement, from statement, and a where statement here. So what we do is we populate the attributes that we want, and from what table. Obviously this is BUT000 for the business partner or accounts. So that's really the first part for us in this implementation, where you can implement filters down the track, which I'll show you a bit later. At the moment there's no filters, we're just pulling everything out just for simplicity. Then we've got this enrich entity set method. So once you've got your collection down and you've paged it into some pageable results, so you don't want to obviously do this processing across really large data sets, but if you've got 1,000 hits in your database against your search criteria, then you start to page through them. So you take the 10 or 20 that you want to page and send that back to your Fury app, and then do your enrichment on it. In this case, all we're doing here is formatting the business partner name, and this is a method that we've implemented in this Z class OData runtime BP over here. Format full name, for example. So this is where we talked about the modularization. It's a very basic example, but just highlights how we can achieve that modularization across multiple classes in this hierarchy. So that's basically it for the account implementation. Here we're just calling the super constructor, where we're storing this entity set table name. So what we need to do is to keep a reference of the table type structure. So then when we can do some data ref transformation in the get entity set method in the DPC, we have a hard typed table type structure to data ref into. That will become apparent soon when we go through the example on how the call chain works. That's really it for the OData account implementation. We'll go through and do some filter implementation in a minute, just to show you how that works, and then we'll run through a full debug session on the call chain when we actually call the collection from the OData service. So what we'd like to do now is to add an address entity into our OData model, just to show you how we go through the process of importing via the data dictionary, creating the data provider class implementation for any address entity. So let's start by going through here and importing a data dictionary structure. So I've already defined the structure for the address, so that's just so we don't have to go through the rigmarole of showing you all the attributes that we've created in there. So let's go and grab our address structure that we've predefined. So let's grab a couple of attributes out of here, try and be as quick as possible. Let's grab street, house number, try and find the country code and region as well. So obviously these are from a standard SAP structure that we've included in our Z structure address. We'll grab the pattern number and address in there as well that we've added. So what we'll do is we'll make these the keys. So now we've imported our address structure. We've got some basic properties in here. So let's go and try and make this a little bit cleaner. So we'll change that to postcode. I'll call that state. Partner ID, because that's what we call it in our account entity. And also address number there as well. So let's just shift those up top like that. So there's an entity set created here as well. What I tend to do is change these. I don't really like the name set at the end of it. I like to have a more semantic description like addresses, like that. Okay, so now we've got our address entity that we've imported from the data dictionary. Rename some of these things here and set the keys. What we probably should do is create an association. So what we want here is our addresses association for our account. So the principal entity is the account. So there's only ever one account. Dependent entity is the address, and obviously you can have multiple addresses like a postal address or deep entity, dependent entity. I've just made a mistake here. Let's just go for 0 to n. We'll set that and go and correct this in a sec. Okay. Sorry, should have typed an address there. So yeah, label my account address is. So here we've defined a nice navigation path here. So let's go and add this into our account entity. So here's our navigation properties. Let's go and create a new one. So name. Oh, excuse the slowness of the system. Addresses, where's the relationship names? This is what we just defined in the associations. Okay, we'll save that. So now we should be able to navigate to our account and then say /addresses in our OData URL, and that should go and call the get entity set of the address entity itself. So let's just save that and generate. Oops, let's go back and change some of this stuff here. So let's do it the way some people at SAP do it. Account to address, like that. And hopefully that's been reflected into the navigation property here. Yes, rightio, let's save that. And there's just a warning there, so that's fine. Let's go and generate the service again. Just hang in there, it's just a little bit slow. It's my cloud appliance. Okay, so then my runtime objects have been regenerated. So the metadata of the service still needs to be sort of regenerated in our service maintenance transaction. But there we've added a new entity and our relationship between them. So the next step after this is to go into our data provider class. So obviously a method has been generated in our DPC class. Here we go here. Let me just jump back out and in again. So there was our accounts that we've created before. So after we've regenerated our service, there should be our addresses entity set in here. Okay, so this is the one we're interested in. Now, so I've already created the runtime class, the concrete entity for the address. So this is kind of the nice thing about this pattern. So I can go through and define these methods, etc. I'm waiting for some guy to build me the actual concrete class, if you like. So I can go and scaffold up these services and re-implement these methods here. So here's our address get entity set method here. So what I'm going to do is redefine that. Once I've got the pattern in place, so what I'm going to do here is to take the accounts get entity set. what I'm going to do is just copy this in here for brevity, just to show you how fast I can create the service. So here's the addresses, get entity set. Let's just put this code in here like this. Not much else I need to do. All we're doing here is reading the an internal table that we've got at runtime called OData provider. So this should hold our address runtime class that we'll work through in a minute with the constructor. So that's all we really need to do. Is all this is a clean pass through. There's no business logic in here whatsoever. So that should compile. We can activate this class or this method here. There we go. Right, now, so once we've got that pass through, this is what I mean about the encapsulation. So there's no business logic in our data provider class. Don't really want any business logic in here whatsoever. We want it all down into our account or our address concrete entity classes. So the next thing that we need to worry about is, okay, so at runtime, we've got this nice method here, but it's reading from a global table that's holding these implementation details that we haven't populated yet. So this is where we come into our constructor here. Okay, let's put this, let's copy and paste just to be quick. So we want a new entity in here. So obviously these names have to align. There's probably some nice ways that you can do this with constants and whatever, just so you don't have to have this hard typed code in here. So there's a class OData address. So that's the concrete class that we've created before. Oh. So let's just put our address back in there. I have created a table type before as well, just so we could store the OData structure of our entity collection. So I've created that before. So the same pattern. This is the new implementation that we want to add in, called address. Here's the class, and what we're doing in the instance is saying here's a new class of our OData. Oh, and made a mistake already. So let's go back in here. There we go. So we want a new instance of our OData address concrete class. And what we're doing is we're adding into this global table called OData provider. So obviously during the get entity set method, we're going, what entity is it? Grab the implementation out of the global table, and then just do a pass through to the get entity set method. Oops, activated that again. So that's essentially it. So what we've done is we've just generated a new entity in our gateway service, had a predefined OData structure that we've created and a table type. We've gone and redefined our addresses get entity set. I already have code in that underlying class. So what we'll do next is go through and do a call chain. So we'll go and test what we've just put into this data provider class here. So what we've just showed you is the creation of a new entity. We've done the generation in the gateway service, put some implementation in the DPC extension class so that we can call a pass-through method to our concrete class. So what we've done is created that navigation path between the account and the address. So what we'll do now is we'll just show you the get entity method. So when you go and navigate into your account and your addresses, and then you want a particular address, we'll just show you how quickly you can implement the get entity method here. So I've already predefined some of the code in the get entity method for our address. So after we've introduced this new entity, there's a method stub here for get entity. So I'm going to redefine this method here. So let's go and get rid of this code here. So the longest time it takes to develop this stuff is the first time, obviously. We've done another get entity method for the accounts. Let's look in here. So because this is generic, I can copy this and put it in our address get entity class here. Yep, there we go. Oh, let's make that neat. And yeah, it's very generic. So this is reading our global table OData providers for our addresses get entity. So when you want to navigate to a particular address, We have a nice clean pass-through in here. Again, no business logic encapsulated in the DPC extension class. It's all in our address class here. So just activate that. What I'll show you now, I just chuck some code into the getEntitySet method. So if you think of a typical project, we can create these classes and hand this off to someone to go and develop. So one person can go and start scaffolding the OData service, one person can start to implement the CRUD functions in the concrete classes. So here's very basic example. We've passed in some keys, obviously the partner number and the address number that we defined in our metadata for the address entity as a key, and just getting the address details here. Alright, so all we've done here as follow-on from the last section was to add the get entity implementation. So if we have a look at the OData service now, it's just me testing before. Let's start from the beginning. So let's have a query here of our accounts. There's only two that we've got. I've only created two business partners in this SAP system at the moment. So let's go grab one of them. Like that. And here's our get entity of the account. We can see the navigation path that we created before, the addresses. So let's go have a look at that. I think I might have a debug point in here. It's just loading up. You can see the little load symbol here. Here we go. Oops. Let's just get rid of all of them. And here's our address collection. So I haven't got any more addresses in here. So what we'll do, let's go and create a new one, just to see what happens. So let's find business partner 1. Yep, I know. Let's go to change mode here. Address overview. Let's go and create another address here. Happy Street, what do you reckon? Happy Street. Oh, that's a very bad thing to do. Very bad habit. Postal code. Let's go back to Penrith and New South Wales. So I've got a couple of addresses in there. Where's our address usage? Oh, I haven't done a lot of configuration in the system, but we've got two addresses in here anyway. So let's just see if this works. Oh, there we go. So there's our address entity. So I've got our Happy Street and Main Street in Penrith. So what we want to do is have a look at the navigation path here to the get entity. So here's our fully defined key for our address. And what have I done here? Oh, I've typed something in completely wrong. Copy paste error. And there's our get entity method. So all we've done there is written some code so we could get the particular address entity, and as you can see, we've only just copied and pasted some code into our data provider class so we could get the nice pass through to our OData address concrete entity. Let's just go grab another one over here. Here we go, addresses. Oh, do it again. Silly cut and paste. What have I done? Addresses, partner 1, and type some bad stuff at the end. Sorry. And there's our get entity. So it's obviously called the other address get entity. So that's a very quick way to scaffold up your OData services with structures. You've got your navigation path in place, so then you can generate your OData service and your DPC classes and do your pass-through, waiting for someone to go and actually build the logic inside your get entity method. Very, very nice way to accelerate your OData and entity development.